Hi everyone. So welcome back to Clayton's Imaginarium, where we have another film review. So this time we're focusing on a film that came out fairly recently, and maybe isn't as widely known, as sort of came in under the radar, and that is The Convert. So this film is a co-production between New Zealand, Australia, and the United Kingdom. It was actually, I believe, it premiered at the Toronto International Film Festival back in 2023, around about September time, and then ended up being released much later, actually, about March in New Zealand, and then about June in Australia, which is about the same time as the that I came across in the, in the UK. So it's directed by Lee Tamahori, and it's a essentially the film follows a character named Thomas Monroe, who is played by Guy Pearce, who tremendous actor, has done a lot of great movies. So he's a minister essentially from the UK, and he goes to New Zealand, essentially, on a mission to introduce Christianity, or at least start the conversion process of the Maori tribes that are currently there. But what happens is that when he arrives, there is an ongoing sort of tribal warfare going on between two different tribes. One is trying to essentially subjugate smaller tribes and take over, and essentially kind of like a warmonger. Like that one of the chiefs is kind of trying to take over. All the local tribes and the areas, and eventually, there's also another tribal leader whose approach is a bit more kind of peaceful, and like he doesn't really want to have war. Um, but anyway, so he arrives in this, sort of landscape. And just to note, this is set in 1830, and it's he arrives, and there's this, as I say, there's this kind of warfare going on, and everything's a bit chaotic. And he essentially saves the young daughter of a chieftain that is from the tribe I mentioned, where they're a bit more kind of they have a bit more of a peaceful approach to things, and so he saves her from essentially being killed by this other chieftain who's like this warmonger. He's kind of taken over these tribes. So he essentially saves her, and by trading, he has this lovely horse in the film that's like pure white, and so he trades the horse to essentially save her life. And essentially it goes from there, really. And he arrives at the British settlement of Epworth, and to start his missionary work in the area. And but then things don't quite go as smoothly as maybe he'd hoped. Of having sort of going to this essentially new world and for a better life, but it turns out that it's very much a chaotic landscape, and obviously the British settlement there is also not welcomed by by the sort of warmonger chieftain who's kind of taking over things. And also there's there's elements of because he saved this the young daughter of this chieftain, and he takes her to the settlement to essentially become her, tutor in religion and Christianity, and teach her about Christianity with permission from her father. So, but the problem is because they're in a British settlement, there's people in that settlement who are very much against having, anyone of Maori descent being a part of it, and so there's, without spoiling anything, there's some, sort of wrongdoings that happen in the settlement as well. Um, so, but yeah, he gets caught up in this bloody war between the tribes, and sort of becomes, and also, this is also a story about him redeeming himself, because you get a bit of backstory with him, that essentially he's been a soldier in the past, and essentially he has demons, his own demons, and he's trying to essentially change his life, and that's why he's a minister and all that. But that's without going too much depth with that as well, because it's part of the characterization. Obviously, I don't want to go in too much detail if people haven't seen it, but so essentially that's the outline of the plot. So what is this film like overall? I thoroughly enjoyed this film. Like I say, it came out of nowhere, but the sort of it's interesting. There's been a couple of sort of projects from New Zealand, past and a bit more recent, that sort of have come up on Amazon, and I'll probably do actually a review of a couple of other productions that I've seen from New Zealand that were really good, that I would highly recommend, but that'll be for another video. But essentially, thoroughly enjoyed this film. I do think it has some pacing issues, I won't lie. There's parts where it does feel a little bit sort of, that it could have had a bit more work in terms of the editing, in the sense of just there's certain parts where it feels a bit more kind of slower when it maybe doesn't need to be. Personally, I didn't think it was a major issue. I quite like films that take their time and flesh out characters, but at times it felt like, okay, we could probably move on from this part, but that doesn't happen very often. I would say it happens a bit more in the first half of the film, where everything is kind of being set up. But it's, as I say, it's a very minor thing. I wouldn't say it's a major issue. But in terms of the acting in this, the acting is absolutely superb. And yeah, just everyone brings their A game. I also think there's a really good sort of, like, the way they depict the Maori culture and tribes is also really well done. And I wouldn't expect anything less, actually, because it's a co-production, and New Zealand, or at least the films I've seen from New Zealand, are very good at sort of depicting that culture, and at least from my perspective. I mean, to anyone with Maori descent, they could maybe speak on that further, but for me personally, it does come across like it's very respectful to the Maori culture. So that comes across brilliantly in this film, and you really see about how, and there's sort of like this subtext in the film, in the sense of where they've been, it kind of makes a point about these tribes have been fighting with edged weapons for, like, for a very long time, essentially. But then during sort of this period of time, muskets are being introduced, and gunpowder, and all the rest of it, and it changes the game. And there was obviously an agenda to use that against the tribes, so that knowing that they're sort of there's these warring tribes, in order to essentially have them kill each other quicker. So yeah, there's a nice subtext, you know, of the history and the period, and kind of what would have been the agenda of the British, and you know, because they were settling there and making settlements. So that, but it does it very, very well. It doesn't ever make those things a focal point. It's more about that is just what's happening in this time period. It's never sort of you know, it's never thrust down the throat of the audience, if that makes sense. It's more about, you know, it's very much depicting the history of that time, and this film is depicting history that's not very well known. You know, it may be more known to people who are you know, who are in New Zealand, you know, have been brought up in New Zealand and in that culture, but for people you know, from this side of the world, you know, there's not. It's a period of history that I don't think people really know as much about, compared to say maybe American history, where you know about the sort of indigenous Americans who, you know, people know a bit more about that history than they would say about this. But so that's what made this film quite also pleasant, was getting to see at least a small window of or a depiction of history in New Zealand at this sort of time period, and I thought that was really, really cool. So yeah, I mean, like I say, overall, highly recommend this film if you're able to find it. I know that it's kind of distributing slowly worldwide, but even if it comes out on you know, physical media, I'm a big physical media guy. I love getting films on physical media. It's just, you know, for me, it's so important to, you know, because that is your copy of that film. You know, it's tangible, it's in your hand. I'm just a bit old school in that way. I'm not really hot on streaming services and the fact that 1 minute a film's available, then it gets taken away. I really don't like that. So, so I'd highly recommend this, or, you know, down the line, definitely recommend it for physical. You know, if you buy it on Blu-ray or whatever is your preference. Highly recommend it. But yeah, this film came out of nowhere, and you know, was just one of those that I think should be seen by as many people as possible, because, you know, I just think it's it's a very interesting story, very interesting period of history, and the acting is brilliant, the direction is great, and I think, you know, it's yeah, it's just a very well made film, and I think, you know, this director has done other, you know, other films that are also very good, and so for me, that, you know, it was highly likely that it was going to be good, but yeah, until watching it, you never know. But yeah, I would highly recommend this to you all if you get some time, and you know, just interested in seeing a little bit of world cinema, you know, because that's really where you're getting a lot more of the creativity, and you're getting a lot more of, you know, just interesting stories. And I'll end on this note. The characterization in this film is, you know, the characters have depth. You know, it's very rich in that sense. And you know, to be fair, I would expect that, being that this film is based on a book called Wolf, but spelt Wulf, by Hamish Clayton, who, you know, it was a novel that came out in 2011, and so this is, you know, basically from a story that was written by Michael Bennett and based on that book, and so that's why I also think to some degree that's why it's the characters are very rich and it's fleshed out. So yeah, if you get some time, check this film out, The Convert, starring Guy Pearce, and yeah, check this one out. It's a great movie to watch if you get some time. But yeah, that's it for now. If you like this video, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell for all notifications, and I'll see you on the next one, guys.